The media drumbeat that Joe Biden should get into the presidential race built all summer, but the pundits pulled back after Hillary Clinton's strong debate performance.
If he was waiting or looking for a Clinton mess up to give him an opening to get into the race, he didn't find that last night.
So today we're talking about her performance and not the huge vacuum in the race that needs to be filled by a white knight like Joe Biden.
Yet the drumbeat quickly became deafening again as more journalists became convinced that the vice president was almost certain to get in.
I've talked to several people close to him who say that in phone calls and private meetings, he's indicated he wants to get in, is likely to get in, but that he's not going to be rushed. And that in one phone call, I'm told very recently, he said, I'm going to get in, but over the next month.
But talking to Democratic sources today, there are several in this town who are very, very confident that Vice President Biden is going to make that decision this week. And there is a very good feeling among those sources that he is going to run, Wolf.
Joe Biden's going to get in. I'm quite confident. I think he'll get in tomorrow or Tuesday.
Fortunately, I believe we're out of time, the time necessary to mount a winning campaign for the nomination.
He's getting in tomorrow or Tuesday. And Mercedes Schlapp and Kirsten Powers are back with us. Kirsten, this was everywhere. New York Magazine. We were already months into the Biden campaign. So wasn't this display of we know what's really going on inside the Biden world kind of embarrassing?
I think it was embarrassing. I can't speak to people's sources, though. If Biden people were, in fact, telling reporters this and misleading them, then we would have to ask why would they be doing that. And, I trust Ed Henry, and he says he's speaking to people that are close to Biden. I think he probably is speaking to people who are close to Biden. And I also think there was a part of people wanting him to get in, so there were a lot of people looking for something to shake up the race and maybe, and some little confirmation bias, perhaps, that you're looking for it and you want it to happen.
Because to me, this was everything that's wrong with political journalism, which is quoting unnamed sources who were not Biden, or maybe the people closest to him, but there were people who were talking to the vice president's circle. And we now know that he never got close to yes, and this was all media BS.
Well, up to a certain point, you wonder if Joe Biden wanted to keep the story alive, number one. And number two...
Oh, I'm not disagreeing with that.
And number two, the media's role being this excitement, this idea that Joe Biden might be getting into the race any day, and they really wanted to write the story. And the fact that, they are basing, like Kirsten said, they're basing it on the sources that they're talking to. So someone was feeding them the information. But I have to tell you, I think the media was really they wanted this race to happen, and they were just waiting on Joe to pull to
Well, and sometimes mistakes were made. I mean, Fox's Ed Henry qualified his report, saying that he talked to three sources who said that Biden was likely to get in, but not right away. And then a banner went up on Fox, we have that, Ed Henry sources, VP Joe Biden about to announce presidential run, but that's not what Ed Henry reported. Mm-hmm. So, Kirsten, what about this notion that there was, I would call it almost an effort to draft Joe Biden, and you call it confirmation bias, because let's face it, reporters were hungry for a more competitive race on the Democratic side.
But I do think people were feeding this to them. So I have to ask, in that case, what do people do if people are being legitimately talking to people that are close to Biden who are saying this, unless we're going to say the reporters were all making this up. And I have to say that
they were used.
Most of the people I was talking to who are very plugged into the Democratic world also really felt that Biden was going to get in. And now many of them felt that he shouldn't get in. Mm-hmm. But the sense was very much that he wanted to run, that he was, that if he thought he could beat Hillary, he would. And look, the idea that he was never close to doing it, that's hard for me to believe when you look at the Maureen Dowd column, because somebody very, very, very close to Joe Biden.
No, it was Joe Biden.
Yeah, right.
But these were leaks.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, you don't give that to Maureen Dowd unless you are seriously thinking
unless you are keeping your options open, which is what I believe that Joe Biden did. And at the same time, anybody who watched him, publicly grieving for his late son, Beau, with Colbert or anyone else, had to know that he wasn't there.
Well, the vice president was sending mixed messages. So on the one hand, you had him going to Pennsylvania, Labor Day parade with the unions. Then secondly, he was on late night television where he talked about his son and how devastating the loss. And really, I think that was one of the biggest red flags when he did go on late night television. And he basically was like, well, I don't think I'm ready. He made these comments that really, if the media would have picked up on it, which they did, but again, they kind of just pushed it aside and said, no, we're going with our sources. We think.
Yet, I see zero remorse or any sense of embarrassment in the media, or like we have to figure out a way not to make this mistake next time. No, it's like, okay, let's talk about
They moved on.
Bernie Sanders.
Well, I think that you're hitting on something important, which is that they're really, I think it's gotten to the point where people just know they can say things, and then on the off chance they're right, then everybody says, oh, look, you were right. But if they're wrong, nobody cares. You just move on, and everybody's doing it.
Speaking of moving on, let me move to the Republican race, where Donald Trump still leading in the polls, but there was a couple polls showing him behind Ben Carson in Iowa, but there's a new CBS poll this morning showing him tied with Carson in Iowa and way ahead in a couple of other states. But Jeb Bush, meanwhile, went on Megyn Kelly's show and is trying to mix it up with or defend himself on Trump's attacks about his brother's role before the September 11th, 2001 attacks. Let's take a look.
Trump argues George Tenet offered a warning that
Trump doesn't know what he's talking about. Trump doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't know anything about this, and he doesn't know what he's talking about. There were massive investigations of this. There were hearings.
Is it fair for the media to press Jeb Bush about 9/11 because of his brother, because Trump attacked his brother? I do. Of course, Jeb did say that this was pathetic on Trump's part, so you have the food fight. But I noticed that some liberals were happy to relitigate was this George W. Bush's fault somehow.
Right. Well, I've been saying for quite some time that I don't think he should have to be accountable for his brother any more than I should be accountable for my brothers. We wonderful people, but we see the world very differently. We operate differently. We have different professions. In this case, they have the same profession, but he's not responsible for what his brother did. The only thing he should be asked is what any other Republican would be asked. So I think it's fair if something starts. Look, if Donald Trump attacked George Bush, then you would want to know, do you agree with this? Do you think, that's fair?
Now, obviously, both the Clinton administration and the Bush administration bear some responsibility for not being as fully prepared as we might have been. But is there a double standard question here? So if it is fair for the media to to challenge Hillary Clinton on her preparedness in Benghazi, which we talked about in the first segment, isn't it also fair to challenge George Bush and, by extension, Jeb Bush about 9/11?
Yeah, I think it's unfair. I don't think that the media
I think both are unfair.
I think if you either do it one way or the other way. The mere fact that, for example, in the case of Hillary Clinton, why aren't they asking her about her husband's intelligence failure before 9/11? They're not asking her the same question that they're asking Jeb Bush. I mean, it's so, and the fact that Jeb Bush has to become sort of that spokesperson for his brother, I think, is completely unfair.
In a way that you say Hillary is not put on the spot when it comes to her husband's administration, although it's a long campaign. Mercedes Schlapp, Kirsten Powers, thanks very much.